The crystalline spires of the Stellarian embassy pierced the purple clouds of Nexus Prime, their iridescent surfaces reflecting the twin suns' light in mesmerizing patterns. Commander Marcus Reed adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform one final time before entering the grand reception hall. After 15 years of interstellar negotiations, he thought he'd seen everything, but the Stellarians were different. First Ambassador Nyx stood at the center of the chamber, her silver-scaled skin catching the light like thousands of tiny mirrors. Her ceremonial robes flowed around her tall frame in waves of midnight blue, giving her an almost ethereal appearance. But it was her eyes that caught Marcus's attention, 3 pairs of amber orbs that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. "Commander Reed," she spoke, her voice carrying a musical quality that the universal translators couldn't quite capture. "Welcome to our sacred halls. We've awaited Earth's representative with great anticipation." Marcus bowed precisely 45 degrees, just as the cultural briefings had instructed. "The honor is mine, First Ambassador. Earth looks forward to establishing peaceful relations with the Stellarian Empire." The ritual greetings continued as other Stellarian officials entered the hall, their movements graceful and synchronized. Marcus noticed how they all maintained a precise distance from the ornate throne at the chamber's far end, a massive structure carved from what appeared to be a single piece of crystal. "Your arrival marks a historic moment," Nyx continued, gesturing toward a long table laden with exotic fruits and beverages. "Please share sustenance with us as we discuss the terms of our alliance." The negotiations proceeded smoothly at first. Marcus presented Earth's proposals for trade routes and cultural exchange programs, while Nyx offered insights into Stellarian technology and astronomical knowledge. But as the hours wore on, Marcus began to notice something odd about the throne room's layout. Every time a Stellarian moved near the throne, they performed an elaborate series of gestures, almost like a dance. His curiosity piqued. Marcus found himself drawn to the mysterious structure during a brief recess. "Fascinating craftsmanship," he remarked, stepping closer to examine the intricate patterns carved into the crystal. "How long has this throne been part of your ceremonies?" The room fell silent. Nyx's 3 pairs of eyes widened in alarm. "Commander Reed, please step away from." But it was too late. Marcus had already placed his hand on the throne's armrest to steady himself as he leaned in for a closer look. A brilliant light erupted from the crystal, enveloping him in a cocoon of energy. When the light faded, the Stellarians had all dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. Nyx alone remained standing, her expression a mixture of shock and something else was that amusement. "The throne has chosen," she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "By ancient law, Commander Marcus Reed of Earth now holds the right of guidance over the Stellarian people." Marcus withdrew his hand as if burned. "I'm sorry, what?" "Our throne is more than a symbol," Nyx explained, approaching him with measured steps. "It is a living artifact created by our ancestors to identify those worthy of leadership. No one has activated it in over 3 centuries until now." "There must be some mistake," Marcus protested, looking around at the still kneeling officials. "I'm here as a diplomat, not a—" "The throne does not make mistakes, Commander," Nyx interrupted, her tone firm but not unkind. "You have been chosen to guide our people through the coming changes, and by our most sacred laws, I am now bound to serve as your primary advisor and—" She paused, her scales shifting color slightly in what Marcus would later learn was the Stellarian equivalent of a blush. "Personal companion until you fully understand our ways." Marcus ran a hand through his short dark hair, trying to process the implications. "And if I refuse?" "The choice has been made," Nyx replied simply. "The only question now is how we proceed. But I warn you, Commander, this position comes with responsibilities and dangers you cannot yet imagine." As if to emphasize her point, a low rumble shook the chamber. Through the towering windows, Marcus could see ships appearing in the purple sky, ships that hadn't been there moments before. "The other houses have already learned of your ascension," Nyx said grimly. "And not all of them will welcome a human holding such power over our people." Marcus looked from the gathering ships to the expectant faces of the Stellarian officials, finally resting on Nix's complex expression. He'd come seeking a diplomatic agreement. Instead, he'd stumbled into what appeared to be an interstellar political crisis. And somewhere deep inside, despite the rational part of his mind screaming about protocols and procedures, he felt a thrill of excitement. This was going to be one hell of a story to report back to Earth Command, assuming he survived long enough to make the report. The Stellarian palace halls echoed with hurried footsteps as Nix led Marcus through a maze of crystalline corridors. Guards with ceremonial spears flanked them, their scales shimmering with an intensity that Marcus now recognized as anxiety. "The noble houses are demanding an immediate audience," Nix explained, her robes flowing behind her as they walked. "House Vex and House Meridian have already dispatched their representatives." Marcus matched her swift pace, his mind racing. "Tell me about these houses. What should I expect?" Before Nix could answer, they emerged into a vast circular chamber. Holographic displays filled the air, showing various regions of Stellarian space. Several elegant figures waited for them, their scales displaying a rainbow of metallic hues. A Stellarian with copper-toned scales stepped forward, his ceremonial armor clicking softly. "So this is the human who dares claim the ancestral throne." His 3 pairs of eyes narrowed. "I am Lord Terius of House Vex." "The throne chose him, Terius," Nix countered smoothly. "Or do you question the wisdom of our ancestors?" Another figure, this one with emerald scales, laughed softly. "We question the convenience of its timing, First Ambassador. Just as the trade negotiations reach a critical phase, a human accidentally activates our most sacred relic." Marcus studied the gathered nobles, nodding their positions and body language. His military training hadn't prepared him for alien politics, but leadership was leadership, regardless of species. "Your skepticism is understandable," he said, stepping forward. "I didn't come here seeking power, but now that I have this responsibility, I intend to honor it." "Honor it?" Terius scoffed. "You know nothing of our ways, our traditions, our—" A thunderous explosion rocked the chamber. Warning signals flashed across the holographic displays as a section of the palace's defensive shield flickered. "House Saitara," Nix hissed, her scales darkening. "They're making their move earlier than expected." Marcus's military instincts kicked in. "Status report, now." The Stellarian officials responded automatically to the authority in his voice. One activated a detailed tactical display, showing multiple hostile ships approaching the palace. "House Saitara claims the throne's choice is invalid," explained the emerald-scaled noble. "They're demanding a traditional challenge of succession." "Which means?" Marcus asked, already suspecting the answer. "Combat," Nix replied grimly. "Their champion against you to the death." Another explosion shook the chamber. Marcus watched as more enemy ships appeared on the tactical display, their weapons charging. "First things first," he said, studying the defense grid. "We need to coordinate our shield generators. Lord Terius, I see House Vex has ships in orbit. Will you stand with the throne's choice or with the challengers?" Terius's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep bronze. "House Vex honors tradition, even when tradition chooses unexpectedly." He touched a communication crystal on his armor. "My ships are at your command." Marcus nodded, then turned to the tactical display. "Nix, I need everything you know about House Saitara's battle tactics, and someone get me a secure channel to Earth Command. If we're heading into a civil war, my superiors need to know." As the nobles rushed to comply, Nix moved closer to Marcus. "You're handling this surprisingly well." "Years of crisis management training," he replied, then smiled slightly. "Though they never covered accidentally becoming alien royalty." "There's something else you should know," Nix said quietly. "The challenge of succession, it's not just combat. The champion must also complete 3 sacred trials, each designed to test wisdom, compassion, and sacrifice." "Of course there are trials," Marcus muttered. "Any other surprises I should know about?" Nix's scales rippled with what he was learning to recognize as embarrassment. "Well, as your bound advisor, tradition requires that I assist you in preparing for the trials, all aspects of preparation. Before Marcus could ask for clarification, another explosion rocked the palace. The tactical display showed House Saitara's ships moving into attack formation. "Right," he said, pushing aside his questions about Stellarian traditions. "First, we survive this assault, then we can worry about trials and preparations." The gathered nobles watched as he began issuing orders, coordinating their defenses. Some still showed skepticism in their scale patterns, but none challenged his authority. The throne had chosen, and now they would all face the consequences together. As Marcus organized their forces, he caught Nyx watching him with an unreadable expression. He had a feeling the preparations she mentioned would prove just as challenging as the space battle unfolding above them, though perhaps in very different ways. The command center deep within the Stellarian palace hummed with activity as Marcus studied the latest intelligence reports. 3 days had passed since House Saitara's initial attack, and the situation had grown more complex with each passing hour. "Another noble house has declared neutrality," Nyx reported, her silver scales dimmed with fatigue. "House Solaris claims they will not take sides until the challenge is complete." Marcus nodded, watching the holographic map as yet another sector turned gray, indicating neutral territory. "They're waiting to see who wins before committing, classic political strategy even on Earth." A junior advisor approached, his bronze scales flickering anxiously. "Commander, we've detected unusual energy signatures from House Saitara's stronghold. They appear to be preparing something significant." Marcus expanded the relevant section of the map, studying the readings. His time working with Stellarian technology was limited, but he'd learned quickly. "These patterns, they're similar to the throne's energy signature." Nyx moved closer, her robes brushing against his arm. "Impossible. The ancestral artifacts can't be replicated unless," her scales paled, "unless they found another one." "Another throne." Marcus turned to her, nodding how her 3 pairs of eyes had widened in alarm. "Not a throne," she explained, "but our ancestors created many artifacts of power. Most were lost during the Great Schism, if House Saitara has found one." The junior advisor's scales shifted to a warning red. "Commander, multiple quantum breaches detected around the palace perimeter." Reality itself seemed to tear open as shimmering portals appeared throughout the command center. Armored figures emerged, their weapons already charging. But something was wrong with their movements, too rigid, too mechanical. "Saitaran combat automata," Nyx hissed, pulling Marcus behind a control panel as energy bolts filled the air. "They've merged ancient technology with modern warfare systems." Marcus drew his Earth-issue sidearm, knowing the standard rounds would likely be useless against advanced alien armor. "We need to reach the throne room, whatever they're after." "They're not after the throne," came a new voice. A tall figure stepped through the largest portal, his scales a deep purple that seemed to absorb light. "We're after you, human." "Lord Saitara," Nyx breathed, her voice carrying equal measures of recognition and disgust. The Stellarian lord smiled, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. "The throne's choice was a mistake, one we intend to correct. But first, we require a sample of your genetic material, Commander Reed. Your unique interaction with our technology has proven most interesting." Marcus's mind raced, connecting dots. The attacks weren't about the throne at all. You needed a distraction while you prepared this strike force. "Clever human," Lord Saitara nodded. "Perhaps now you understand why your kind cannot be allowed to hold power here. Your species is too adaptable, too unpredictable. Better to study you and extract what makes you special." The automata advanced, their movements synchronized with inhuman precision. Marcus counted at least 12, with more likely guarding the exits. Standard tactics wouldn't work against machines that probably had centuries of combat data programmed into them. But then again, they'd never fought a human before. "Nyx," he whispered, "remember those preparations you mentioned? I think it's time for a crash course." He gestured subtly toward the ceremonial crystals decorating the walls. "Do those conduct energy?" Her scales flickered with sudden understanding. Yes, but the resonance could. Perfect. Marcus didn't let her finish. He aimed his weapon at the nearest crystal and fired. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The crystal shattered, creating a chain reaction through the decorative lattice. Pure energy cascaded through the command center, overloading the automata's sensitive sensors. Lord Saitara roared in fury as his machines began to malfunction, their coordinated movements deteriorating into chaos. Marcus used the confusion to grab Nyx's hand. Run! They sprinted through the chaos, ducking under wild energy blasts from the confused automata. Behind them, Lord Saitara was shouting orders, trying to regain control of his forces. The sacred trials, Nyx gasped as they ran. This might count as the first wisdom in the face of overwhelming odds. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. If surviving an alien robot ambush counts as wisdom, I think humanity's been wiser than anyone gave us credit for. They rounded a corner, only to find more automata blocking their path. But these ones moved differently, more fluidly, more alive. House Meridian stands with the throne's choice, announced the emerald-scaled noble from earlier, stepping out from behind his own mechanical guardians. Perhaps it's time we showed House Saitara why our ancestors chose to limit the use of such technology. As the two forces of automata clashed, Marcus realized the political landscape was shifting yet again. The question was, would these new alliances help him survive long enough to complete the trials, or were they just another layer of hidden agendas in an increasingly dangerous game? The ancient trial chamber pulsed with ethereal light as Marcus faced his final challenges. A week had passed since Lord Saitara's failed assault, and the political landscape of the Stellarian Empire had transformed dramatically. The trial of compassion begins, intoned the Elder Council, their combined voices echoing through the crystalline chamber. Choose wisely, Commander Reed. Before him stood 3 doors, each shimmering with different colors. Nyx watched from the sidelines, her silver scales reflecting the ambient light. She couldn't help him now, this was his test alone. The first door revealed a wounded Saitaran soldier, one of many captured during the failed coup. The second showed a damaged piece of ancestral technology, its power critical and unstable. The third displayed a diplomatic message from Earth, demanding immediate explanation for the silence from their commander. Marcus understood the test's true nature immediately. It wasn't about choosing one over the others. It was about finding a solution that served all. He stepped forward, his voice clear and confident. The Saitaran soldiers' wounds were caused by malfunctioning ancestral tech. Their knowledge could help us stabilize the damaged artifact, which in turn could demonstrate to Earth the importance of maintaining peaceful relations with the Stellarian Empire. The chamber hummed with approval. Even the most skeptical council members showed respect in their scale patterns. The human understands, the Elder Council proclaimed. The trial of compassion is complete. The grand coronation chamber of the Stellarian Empire blazed with light from all 3 suns. Representatives from every noble house, even House Saitara, now under new leadership, gathered to witness the unprecedented ceremony. Marcus stood before the ancestral throne, no longer the confused diplomat who had accidentally triggered an empire-wide crisis. Beside him, Nyx's scales shimmered with pride, and something more personal, something that had grown between them through shared dangers and quiet moments of understanding. The trials are complete, announced the Elder Council. Commander Marcus Reed has demonstrated wisdom in battle, compassion in judgment, and sacrifice in putting the needs of both our peoples before his own ambitions. Marcus stepped forward, his ceremonial robes combining Earth military honors with Stellarian royal symbols. I accept this responsibility not as a ruler, but as a bridge. Earth and the Stellarian Empire have much to learn from each other. Together, we can build something greater than either of us could achieve alone. The throne pulsed with energy, acknowledging his words. But this time, the light spread throughout the chamber, touching every Stellarian present. A shared vision of unity, of possibility, of a future where different species could work together while maintaining their unique identities. Nyx moved to stand beside him, her role as advisor now expanded to include ambassador between cultures. "The ancestors chose well," she said softly. "They saw in you what both our peoples needed, someone who could understand both worlds." As the ceremony concluded and the celebrations began, Marcus looked out over the assembled crowd. Humans and Stellarians mingled, sharing stories and ideas. Even Lord Saitara's successor was engaged in animated discussion with Earth's diplomatic corps. "You know," he said to Nyx, "when I first touched that throne, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my career." She laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. "And now? Now I think it was the universe's way of saying sometimes mistakes are exactly what we need." He smiled. "Though next time, maybe we can negotiate an alliance without the robot armies and ancient trials." "Where would be the fun in that?" Nyx's scales flickered with amusement. "Besides, you humans seem to thrive on impossible situations." As they looked out over their united people, Marcus realized she was right. Sometimes the biggest diplomatic incidents led to the greatest breakthroughs, and sometimes claiming a throne meant building bridges instead of walls. The end.